It is moving day, and you did everything right. Weeks ago you found a moving company online. Great reviews, a polished, professional website, a local address, with a price that comfortably beat every other quote you got. You paid your deposit, you locked in the date, and you relaxed. One big worry checked off the list before the chaos of moving even began. Now the truck pulls into your driveway. The name painted on the side of it is a company you have never heard of. A crew climbs out, people you never spoke to. They have no record of the price you agreed to, no copy of your contract, and no reason at all to honor it. Because the company you actually hired, the one with the glowing reviews and the friendly salesperson on the phone, the one you researched and trusted, never owned a single truck. It was never going to move anything, ever. It was a middleman with a phone and a website, and you were its product. You did not hire a moving company. You hired a broker. Your entire move, every single thing you own, was quietly sold to the lowest bidder on a website you never saw. So let us open the real books on the moving business. Why the company you hired often owns nothing and touches nothing. Why the deposit you paid was never really a deposit. And why the truck that finally shows up can hold everything you own hostage. The buy-in. Start with getting in, because there are actually two completely different businesses here, wearing the exact same costume. The first is the carrier, the real mover. To build one, you need trucks, and trucks are expensive. You need a warehouse, moving equipment, packing crews, drivers, fuel, and heavy insurance to cover a house full of someone else's belongings. You need federal operating authority, a motor carrier number, and you take on full legal responsibility for everything you load. It is a serious, capital-heavy logistics business, the kind that takes years and real money to build, and can be sunk by a single bad season. The second is the broker, and a broker needs almost none of that. To start a moving brokerage, you need little more than a website, a phone bank, a sales team, and a broker license. No trucks, no warehouse, no movers. A broker never lifts a box, never drives a mile, never touches your furniture. They are a call center, nothing more. Often sitting in a different state entirely from where your move is happening. Their entire business is selling the move, then handing it off to a carrier to actually perform. So there are several tiers to this world, and telling them apart is nearly impossible from the outside. The local carrier that owns its trucks and does the physical work. The van line agent, a local carrier operating under a big national brand. The pure broker, an asset-light sales operation. And at the bottom, the rogue operators, brokers and carriers who have turned the whole system into a scam. But here is what matters. When you go online and search for movers, the broker and the carrier look absolutely identical. Same slick websites, same promises, same friendly quotes. One owns a fleet of trucks and answers to the law for your belongings. The other owns a phone and answers to nobody. Most customers have no idea which one they are actually talking to, or that the difference will decide the entire fate of their move. What you inherit. If you run a broker, you inherit a beautiful, asset-light machine, and one enormous liability. Here is the machine. You collect a deposit from the customer, and here is the secret almost nobody knows. That deposit is not really a deposit. It is called a binder fee, and it does not go toward the cost of the move at all. It goes straight into the broker's pocket as their commission, earned the instant you paid, whether your move ever goes well or not. That commission is not small. Brokers routinely keep somewhere between 20 and 50% of the entire job value for themselves, purely for making the sale. Then you inherit the load board. This is the auction, hidden from the customer entirely. Once you have the customer's money and their moving details, you post the job on an online marketplace where actual carriers bid to haul it, and you sell it to whoever will do it cheapest, pocketing the difference. But you also inherit the liability, and it is a big one. You have no control over the carrier who shows up. You do not own the trucks, you did not train the crew, and your name is not on the paperwork that legally matters. If the carrier is late, or careless, or dishonest, you can just shrug. You already have your commission. And the customer is left dealing with a company they never chose, and never spoke to. If you run a carrier instead, you inherit the opposite. Real trucks, real crews, real insurance, real liability, and a stack of jobs. Many of them sold to you by a broker who quoted a price you now have to either honor or renegotiate. And you inherit the brutal economics of actually moving things, which we will get to. The revenue layers. Money flows through this business in layers, and the order of them is the whole surprise. Layer 1, the broker's binder fee. This is the purest money in the entire industry. The broker collects a large upfront payment, keeps a huge slice of it as commission, and has now made most of their profit before a single box has been touched. Low overhead, fast cash, no trucks. It is the most profitable seat at the table, and it is also where most of the scams begin. Almost no cost, almost all margin, and almost no accountability. That combination is a magnet for bad actors. Layer 2, the broker's markup. Beyond the deposit, the broker sells your job to a carrier for less than they charged you, and keeps the spread. Their whole game is volume, not care. Book as many moves as possible, skim the top of each one, and move on to the next customer before the last one even realizes what happened. Layer 3, the carrier's actual move. This is the real physical business, and its margins are thin. An interstate move is priced mainly on two things: the weight of your stuff and the distance it travels. More weight, more miles, more money. A simple and honest formula when an honest company is running it. A local move is usually priced by the hour. Either way, the number is tied to something real: the weight, the miles, the hours, not plucked from thin air. After the trucks, the fuel, the crew, and the insurance, an honest carrier is left with only a modest slice of the total. Layer 4, the carrier's add-ons. This is where a real mover actually makes its margin. Packing services and materials, storage and transit, and a long list of accessorial fees for stairs, for long carries, for shuttle trucks when the semi cannot reach your door. Then valuation coverage, the moving industry's version of insurance. These extras are often where the genuine profit lives. That move itself barely breaks even for many carriers, but the packing job and the storage bill quietly carry the whole operation. Layer 5, and this is the dark one, the upcharge. In the rogue version of this business, the entire model is built on quoting low to win the job, then demanding far more once your belongings are on the truck. Federal law says a mover working from a non-binding estimate can already collect up to 110% of the quote at delivery. The scammers go far beyond that, and belongings have been held for as much as 5 times the original price. Listen to that again. Here is the single fact that explains almost every moving horror story you have ever heard. The company that sold you your move and the company that actually shows up to perform it are very often not the same company at all. A huge share of the movers you find online are not movers, they are brokers. Pure salespeople who own no trucks, employ no crews, and will never touch a single thing you own. They take your deposit as their personal commission. They post your life onto an auction site, and they sell it to whichever carrier will haul it for the lowest price. Listen to that again. You did not buy a move, you bought a reservation, a promise from a stranger, to find someone else to do the actual work. The price you were so happy with was often just a guess, or a deliberate lie, made by a salesperson who had no idea what your move would actually cost, and no intention of ever doing it. The moving business is not muscle and trucks. It is a sales business, stacked on top of a logistics business, and the gap between the two is exactly where your money, and sometimes your furniture, disappears. Once you understand that, the low quote stops looking like a bargain. It starts looking like bait. The ledger. Turn the page to what it actually costs to move things, because the carrier's ledger is punishing, and it explains everything. A real moving company runs on heavy, unavoidable costs. Start with the trucks, bought or leased, burning fuel by the gallon across the country. Then the crews, physically demanding labor that spikes every summer during moving season and goes quiet in the winter. The warehouse space, and the insurance and the damage claims, because in a business built on carrying fragile, precious things over long distances, some of them will inevitably break, and someone has to pay. Now here is the squeeze that created the modern moving nightmare. A real carrier, with all those real costs, has to compete for your business against a broker's fantasy quote, a lowball number invented by a salesperson with no trucks and no costs at all. An honest mover who quotes you the true price looks expensive and loses the job. The broker who quotes an impossible price wins it, takes the deposit, and dumps the problem onto some carrier down the line. In that environment, the pressure to cut corners or to just lie about the price and make it up later becomes enormous. Thin margins and dishonest competition are the soil the whole scam grows in. Punish the honest quote and reward the impossible one, and you have built a machine that manufactures scams on purpose. The trap. Here is the trap, and it is one of the most brilliant and cruel setups in any business, because every single piece of it feels like it is protecting you when it is doing the opposite. You get a low quote, and it feels like a bargain. It is bait. You pay a deposit, and it feels like you are securing your move and locking in that price. You are doing neither. That deposit is the broker's non-refundable commission, and it locks in nothing. Then comes moving day. Your entire life gets loaded onto a truck, box by box, until the vehicle is full and your empty house is behind you. Only then, with everything you own sitting in a stranger's vehicle, does the real price appear. It lands far higher than the quote. Now look at your position. Your possessions are physically inside their truck. If you refuse to pay the new, inflated number, they just drive away with everything you own and hold it in a warehouse, running up storage fees until you pay. This is the hostage load, and it is one of the most common complaints in the entire industry, filed by the thousands with federal regulators every year. Your own belongings, the things you packed with your own hands, become the weapon used against you. By the time you realize what is happening, you have no power at all, because they are holding the collateral, and the collateral is everything you have. The lowest quote was never the safest choice. It was the most dangerous one, and the deposit that felt like security was the hook that set the whole thing in motion. To understand how this business became a minefield, go back to 1980, and a single law that changed everything. Before then, the moving industry was tightly controlled by a federal agency, the Interstate Commerce Commission. It dictated who was allowed to move goods across state lines and exactly what they were allowed to charge. Getting a license to compete was slow and difficult, which kept the number of movers small and the prices stable. It was rigid, but it was orderly. Then, in 1980, the Household Goods Transportation Act deregulated the entire industry. For the first time, movers could set their own binding prices and compete freely. The gates flew wide open. Hundreds of new moving companies rushed in overnight. Here is what deregulation did. With everyone suddenly free to compete, they stopped competing on service and started competing on one thing only: price. Quotes got lower and lower, and the already thin profit margins got crushed. In that desperate race to the bottom, a new kind of operator appeared, the rogue mover, who realized they could quote a price impossibly low to win the job, and then, once they had your belongings, hijack them for whatever they wanted. The modern moving scam was not some ancient evil. It was born, almost overnight, the moment the industry was deregulated and price became the only thing that mattered. Policing it has been a losing battle ever since. At one point, the federal agency responsible had just a couple of investigators for the entire country, chasing thousands of complaints they had no hope of ever catching up on. The death spiral. So watch what happens when even a legitimate giant plays this game badly, because scams are not the only way to die in this business. Some of the most famous names in American moving are not single companies at all. They are cooperatives, networks of hundreds of independent local agents, all operating under one national brand. That structure was invented back in the late 1920s and early 1930s, when local movers banded together so that a truck carrying a family across the country would not have to drive all the way home empty. Two of the oldest and largest of these networks, brands nearly a century old, names your grandparents would recognize on the side of a truck, eventually ended up owned by a single giant corporation. In the late 1990s, a private equity firm assembled that corporation, combining those two legendary van line brands into what became the largest moving and relocation company in the entire country. Then it took the company public and loaded it with debt. At its peak, it carried more than $1 billion of it. For a while, riding the booming housing market, that worked. People were buying and selling homes constantly, and every home sale meant a move. Then, in 2008, the housing market collapsed. Suddenly, Americans stopped moving. The homes stopped selling, the transfers dried up, and the endless river of moves this giant was built to carry slowed to a trickle. A company with more than $1 billion in debt and a sudden collapse in customers could not survive the gap. It filed for bankruptcy. Its plan wiped out the shareholders completely, and it stiffed the unsecured creditors, which, because of that cooperative structure, included many of its own local agents, the very people who owned the trucks and did the work. They were left with nothing, holding worthless stock and unpaid invoices for work they had already done. The lesson is brutal, and it has nothing to do with scams. In a business with margins this thin, if you pile on debt and bet everything on people needing to move, the moment they stop, the whole giant can come crashing down. So who actually builds a good, lasting business in moving, and how? The survivors do the opposite of the scammers in almost every way. 1. They are carriers, not just brokers. They own their trucks, employ their crews, and put their own name on the line, so the customer who calls them is the same company that shows up and is responsible for everything. 2. They quote honestly, usually after an actual survey of your belongings, in person or by video. They would rather lose a price shopper to a lowball broker than win a job they cannot perform without cheating. 3. They make their real money on the legitimate add-ons. Professional packing, storage, specialty item handling, and valuation coverage, the genuine services that a real mover can deliver and a broker never can. 4. They build a real reputation and live on referrals. Because moving is a business people only need every few years, a wall of genuine verifiable reviews and word of mouth is the most valuable asset a mover can own, and it is the one thing the fly-by-night operators can never fake for long. Trust, in this industry, compounds slowly and pays forever. And 5. They master the logistics. They keep their trucks full in both directions, they schedule tightly around the brutal summer peak, and they run an operation efficient enough to make money at an honest price. In a business this thin, that operational discipline is the whole game. So does owning a moving company actually work? Let us run it, and treat this as a model, not a real company. Say you run an honest, mid-sized carrier, you own a small fleet, you employ trained crews, and you quote real prices after a proper survey. In a good year, your summer is packed with moves booked on your solid reputation, your trucks run full and efficient, and you make strong margins on packing, storage, and the specialty work that brokers cannot touch. Run with discipline and honesty. A real moving company is a genuine, durable business, and a valuable one. Boring, unglamorous, and quietly profitable, year after year, the opposite of the flashy lowball operators who burn bright and vanish. That is the good version. Now the other one. Say you chase the easy money and run as a pure broker, or worse, cut corners as a rogue. The deposits roll in fast, and the overhead is almost nothing, and for a while it feels like free money. But you are building on lies and furious customers. Complaints pile up, the reviews turn poisonous, the regulators start circling, and the moment they shut you down, you have nothing. No trucks, no reputation, no real business, just a burned name you have to abandon and start over. But here is the real verdict. A moving company is not really a bet on muscle and trucks. It is a bet on trust, in an industry almost perfectly designed to destroy it. Winners were the honest carriers who owned their reputation and their equipment and quoted the real price, even when it cost them the sale. Losers were the ones who sold a fantasy, took the deposit, and left the customer, or some other carrier, holding the wreckage, then closed up and reopened next month under a brand new name. So the honest answer is this: in the right hands, as a real carrier, with owned trucks, honest quotes, strong operations, and a hard-won reputation, a moving company is a solid and lasting business. But played as a game of deposits and lowball lies, it is a scam with a short shelf life, and it has left a trail of stolen deposits, hijacked furniture, and broken trust longer than almost any consumer business in America. So look again at what really happened on that driveway. You thought you hired a moving company, a truck, a crew, some strong backs to carry your life from one home to the next. That is what it looked like. But often, you never hired a mover at all. You hired a salesperson who owns nothing, took a cut of your money as a commission, and sold your entire life to a stranger on an auction site you were never shown. That friendly voice that quoted you a great price was never going to lift a single box. The crew that finally showed up, holding everything you own, were the only ones with any real power in the whole arrangement. A moving company does not always make its money moving your things. Sometimes it makes its money selling the promise of the move, taking your deposit, and handing you off to whoever bid the lowest, while your furniture becomes the collateral. You did not buy a move, you bought a reservation, and the person who quoted you the price, and the person holding your entire life in the back of a truck, were never the same person at all.